Please welcome Cary Kellems with I Hate Mondays. Cary?
All right, thank you. I woke up and it's a Monday morning, and the first thing that I hear is that the songbird singing sounds like screaming children in my ears, and the crack of my gun would write their words in blood and silence. So I bent down, picked up my gun, and aimed it at the playground. Oh, I got 500 rounds to chase away my blues, and with my scope I'd capture portraits of the fleeing children that I would choose. And oh, this is the way to start the day, and Mondays will never be the same. I'll paint today a red snow day like San Diego's never seen. The sky will crack with thunder and the blacktop puddle with blood. No school today for me, no school today for you. And in the shadows of my crosshair, school's out forever for a lucky few. It was a dark and gray day to match the blackness of my 16-year-old soul. I reloaded my rifle from my bedroom window, and it became a game of aim, squeeze, crack. Aim, squeeze, crack. And another songbird fell silent to the blacktop. My shots would echo long past this morning of January 29th, 1979. My shots would break the spell of Mondays forever. It was already turning out to be a better day. In quick succession, I had fired until 7 more little bodies laid still. Bodies lying motionless except for the blood trickling onto the playground tabernacle. And from the school ran Principal Rang. A hero had emerged, a hero that would swoop down upon my fallen birds. I dropped him mid-stride, dropped him dead, dead, dead. Next, from the side of the building, another adult zigzagged to gather up a moaning child. He picked up the small child into his arms and dashed towards safety, shielding the injured students with his body. You can't have it. It's my little bird. It's mine. And Mr. Sukar never heard the shot. His body dropped lifeless to become the final refuge of that wounded child. With no more live targets, I began to unload into the classrooms. I shattered windows and shot through doors, all while observing the dark vigil for any other would-be saviors. Why should children be saved? Why should these children be saved? No one had saved me. But parole board had recommended that I be taken in for a psychic evaluation. But my dad wouldn't give permission. Instead, he bought me this rifle with a scope and rounds of bullets. A gift which I used as a perverse revenge for being ignored. Ignored by my classmates, ignored by my dad, and ignored by a mother that had abandoned me long ago. With a sudden screech, a squad car arrived. I squealed with joy. Oh, how I hated the pigs. The patrolman arrived like Santa on a sleigh, all wrapped up in black and white. A gift just waiting for me to open fire. As the officer exited his patrol car and swooped to examine a wounded student, I aimed for his head. This pig was going to be my statement, my trophy, my badge of honor. I forced my breath to slow. I gently exhaled as I squeezed the trigger. And with a crack, shot number 23 was on its way. And as the echo died, the bullet pierced clean through the patrolman's neck. He instinctively rolled for the safety of his vehicle, bleeding and losing consciousness. He was barely able to make the call. Shots fired. Officer down. Multiple victims. Active sniper at Grover Cleveland Elementary. Approach with extreme caution. Enraged that I had missed, I kept firing at the black and white. How could I have missed? How could I have blown my chance to become a famous cop killer? At a safe distance, reinforcements did arrive. The police had ascertained the situation. They ascertained that the suspected shooter was one Brenda Spencer, age 16. She was positioned at her home, which was directly across from Grover Cleveland Elementary. She had shot multiple children and at least 3 adults. But the police, they needed a way to gain access to the wounded. But the entrance to the school had become a killing field controlled by Brenda. Time was ticking to the tune of weak and bleeding hearts. They needed a way to get medical attention to the dying children, and they needed it now. One ex-military police officer suggested that they bring in garbage trucks to provide coverage as they recovered the bleeding children and the adult bodies. Within minutes, 2 garbage trucks arrived. In a scene reminiscent of Vietnam, a cadre of officers and medics were able to use the garbage trucks as shields and retrieve the wounded children and the dead bodies of the principal and the janitor. When Brenda saw the garbage truck, she knew that the end game was near. She built a barricade of mattresses in her hallway, knowing that whether they entered from the front door or the back, her living room would become the new killing field. Grinning, she reloaded her rifle and waited for that next fool officer to break through her doors and into her crosshairs. But hour after hour, nothing came to pass. Outside of her perception, the entire city was watching. The carnage she had wrought seeped like a leak that drained the remaining innocence of our societal minds. Her deadly deeds became the salacious breakfast for a city to feast. But for Brenda, there was nothing but the sound of a helicopter and the excitement for her impending infamy. From deep within her own thoughts, Brenda heard the phone ring. She answered it, and it was an enterprising reporter who had called every number in the phone book on that street until he found the shooter. As she talked to the reporter, a pride and a self-worth filled her dank and bottomless void. She was now famous. The reporter asked her why she did it, why she decided to kill all those children. She beamed like a child posing under the flickering lights of a Christmas tree and said, "I don't like Monday. This livens up the day." And then suddenly she realized that the reporter might just be a ruse for the police to rush in. She slammed down the receiver and returned to her barricade. An hour passed and the phone rang again. This time it was a police negotiator, but he made no demands, just conversation. And they talked for hours. He assured Brenda that they were not coming to get her, that they just wanted to let Brenda tell her side. So late in that day, Brenda surrendered to the police for the promise of a Burger King meal. What they found when they entered her home was just 2 mattresses and the scattered remains of empty booze and beer bottles. Brenda's home was like a tree that from the outside mirrored the forest of suburbia, yet inside it had long since festered with rot. During the trial, Brenda wore a devilish grin that beamed from beneath her red hair. Her smile somehow gave a haunting appearance to her petite 5'1" frame. Brenda Spencer pleaded guilty to the cold-blooded murderings of Mr. Sukar and Professor Ragg, and assault with a deadly weapon. Even though all 8 children she shot survived, and even though the police officer survived, our middle-class community did not survive. Brenda's villainy was later immortalized by the Boomtown Rats in their song, "I Hate Mondays." Brenda was famous. So, in a way, Brenda won. And society lost. But for me, the most chilling scene of this whole ordeal was when my youngest brother told me that earlier in that year, he had often seen Brenda in the quad at Patrick Henry High School frame her schoolmates in an imaginary picture frames that directors use when they're setting a movie scene. Brenda Spencer, America's first female shooter. In an epilogue, as if to bury a painful memory, Grover Cleveland Elementary was eventually leveled and converted into a gated community. This is strangely indicative of how society deals with these issues. Madam Toastmaster.
Wow, Is that true? You-